Hi, my name is Khleif, and I'm the host of the Lifetime Cash Flow Through Real Estate Investing podcast. And every week I interview multifamily rock stars, and we talk about how they've built incredible wealth for themselves and their families through multifamily properties. So hit the like and subscribe buttons to get notified every Monday when a new episode comes out. Let's get to it. Welcome to another edition of How to Build Lifetime Cash Flow Through Real Estate Investing. I'm Khleif, and I'm thrilled you're here, and I'm super excited to have my good friend Maureen Miles back on the show. Now, if you don't know Maureen, she's been interviewed on here a couple of times already, and she's a good friend. She stayed here in our guest house on more than one occasion. So Maureen has been involved in over 3,000 units. In fact, in the last year alone, she sold 1,100 units and purchased another 1,300. She owns a property management company. She owns a construction company. She's a GC. She's a freaking rock star. And she's my friend. Welcome back, sweetie.
Hey, nice to see you, Rod. Thanks for having me back.
Absolutely. So, rather than go back through your history like we normally do, because you've done it already on the show, I'd like to get right into some things because a lot's been happening, obviously. And, I'd love to get your read on some of the things that are happening. And I know that, you recently started or acquired your property management company. So I think I'd like to go that direction and talk about why you brought it in-house. Because I know, you had third-party property management companies for years, and maybe talk about that process. And if COVID had anything to do with it. So I'll just leave it at that, and we'll take it from there and riff from there.
Okay, cool. Well, thanks again. Nice to see you, Rod. I like your background too. So a couple of years ago, I started a property management company after basically firing four. The issues we were having is never with the ownership. They're always great and have good intentions. It's just sometimes that seems like the regional level is where I always seem to kind of bang heads with, and a little bit above that, maybe
I forgot that it's been 2 years. I now I realize what it was you kind of revamped it and you reinvented it. Is that more accurate?
Yeah, what we did is we had about probably 1,200 units when we did that. And we've been going through transitions of purchasing and, purchasing and selling properties and all that. And that's been fine. But I've never really got it kind of, our goal was to do eventually third party management as well. And we never really got that launched. And so one of the things that COVID was actually good for us one of the blessings, right, is it kind of slowed us down. We did slow down in acquisitions, although we did just close on something last week. But this year has been totally different than last year. Mm-hmm. So we started really looking at operations and digging down deeper. And I realized I was getting a bit burned out running things, trying to keep all the balls in the air, right? So my COO I had at the time, or my vice president, I just realized she wasn't quite working out. And we decided to really tear things down and take a look at things. And I realized one of the mistakes I was making is I feel like I was hiring like a VP or a regional with high aspirations to run the company as opposed to like an actual COO. So I decided to do things a little differently this time and look for an actual COO. And I reached out to a couple of brokers I knew because I was thinking, how can we find somebody, right, that would know how, that can run a property management company good? Who would know? Would I ask my HD vendor? Probably not, So try to think outside the box a little bit instead of just putting out resumes and things like that, or asking for resumes. So I reached out to a couple of brokers I know, and they did know of a large group that was just disassembling their management company. The owners were retiring. And they put me in touch with a woman who was a COO. They've managed over 10,000 units, doing third party as well. So I'm like, that's my friggin' person. That's awesome. So I ended up speaking with her, and we ended up shutting down our other company and revamping this. Vicinity Living is the name of it. Right. And so it's her and I. So it is still female run, which is cool. Right. Property management. She has that experience to do third party. So just since July, I believe we're over 1,200 units now, third party, along with
Fantastic. Let me stop you for 1 second, because you've thrown some stuff out that some of the people listening may not know what you're talking about. So, yeah, in third party management, you typically have what's called regional managers that manage multiple assets, multiple properties. So when she said she didn't really want a regional that had aspirations of running a company, and I agree, you need a COO, somebody that's great in all aspects of internal internal management operations. The other thing is when she's saying third party, she formed the management company to manage her own assets, but now she's doing outside management for other owners, which is not uncommon. So it's Vicinia Living, VICINIA living.com, and female run. And let me just add one other thing. Maureen has been such an incredible inspiration to women that want to get into this business. I can tell you, I've got scores of successful warriors in my mentorship program that are ladies that are killing it. And she's been an inspiration for them. So I love the fact that your management company is female run. Anyway, sorry, I wanted to interject that. Please continue.
Yeah, sure. No, and I just, that's what I wanted to share with you, the update.
Okay.
So I think with COVID, there's a lot of people kind of freaking out, but I also know a lot of people that are just, it's given everybody the ability to slow down and kind of find the gift in it, right? And
that
find
is a gift,
the blessing in it. A lot of companies I've heard also, we've went from the Flintstones to the Jetsons in 6 months, right? As far as how much you can operate over Zoom now and how many things we can do remotely. And, you know, we've gotten better online tours on all our properties now and ways to lease online and just to be more efficient in that aspect and just changing with the time. So I do think it's brought some gifts as well. And so
no question. And you know, this is the time, and I will tell you, the strongest companies in history were formed in times like this. And so the fact that, you know, you use that as an opportunity to hone your operations, to enhance your, you know, I'm sure you enhanced your measurement and probably, you know, really took a look at the tech, it sounds like, and you know, with the virtual tours and all that, we're doing exactly the same thing, and it is an opportunity, and so, you know, a lot of people are bemoaning it, but so let me ask you this: how have your collections been on your assets through all of this?
So it's varied. So we're typically in Indiana and Georgia right now are the majority of our assets, and in the markets we're good. In each market, we have one property that's slacking a little bit heavier, and then we have other properties that literally zero affected. So I think that that's just a testament to the manager there, how well they know the people. Like in Indiana, we have one property that's kind of close to the casinos that was there, and so when they shut that down and pulled back, that was it took a little bit of a hit. But then the Indiana, I think it's their HUD, I don't know the exact program, but they stepped up and they actually paid 60% of anybody's rent that was behind. And then also going after kind of like the unemployment, that they got a bump on unemployment. And so collections have been really good. So we've really only seen a blip on 2 of the properties. Do you think, is it based on demographics of those 2 particular assets, where those people are employed, or do you think it's more the on-site management? I think it's a little of both. It has to do with where the people are employed, but right from the very start, we set ourselves up to make sure, number one, people knew that they did have to pay rent. So we started offering, like, if you pay by the 1st, we do it a raffle for 50% off their rent or $300 credit or whatever. So just to get people kind of like, oh, okay, no, we do have to pay it. We are expected to pay it. So that was something that I think definitely worked in our favor. And the other thing was the job thing. But again, that was just kind of a blip, and it's pretty steady now. It's pretty normal now. And those are they dropped down, but it wasn't enough to affect any investor distributions or anything like that. So
right. Let me ask you that on that note, you know, with your crystal ball for the future, have you suspended any Capex? Have you built more operating reserves? Just talk a little bit about your strategy in the event things do get, you know, do start becoming more challenging. Have you done anything different?
Yeah, so we did slow down on some of the Capex measures, just some of the extra things, especially when it first came out, because we wanted to make sure we had some extra reserves in case, you know, nobody really knew how big the hit would be when this thing hit. We were all like, every month we were kind of bracing for it, right? But now that we kind of have the gist of it, we slowed down on some of the Capex. I am putting an extra reserve, like, so we just closed on a property last week, and we do have an extra like 150,000 of just extra debt carry costs that we hold on to, as well as
reserves required by Fannie Mae, right?
Yeah, the Fannie loan. So but that'll turn into Capex in 9 months, which would be sitting there anyway. So we're okay with that.
And just 1 second for the brand newbies who are listening, Capex is the repairs you make right out of the gate when you acquire an asset, or you're going to reposition an asset. It's called capital expenditures. So just for anybody that's super new. Okay.
Yeah, and that's important, Rod, too, just on that Capex thing. I don't know if this ever came out on one of my stories, but my first deal was 117 units in Atlanta, and our Capex budget was $50,000, and we thought we would, we were like
on 100 plus units. That's really funny.
We made it. Luckily, that sucker cash flowed like unbelievable. We bought it for like 24 a door, so sold it for 50 a door. But anyway, so that had a lot of cash flow, so we were okay.
Yeah.
But that's one of like the newbie mistakes. So I just want to make sure your listeners know that, like, get somebody else to look at your Capex budget, because that totally could have burned us.
Or get bids. I mean, you could go out there and just get some bids, and know exactly what it's going to cost. But yeah, you need multiple eyes for sure. And that's absolutely a newbie mistake. And a huge newbie mistake is thinking you're going to do it from cash flow. Now, you got lucky, but a lot of people, fail in this business because they think that they can do their Capex from cash flow, and that's a recipe for disaster. So let me ask you a question. And I'm going to go to the, we're in a male dominated, for the most part, industry. I just did an episode, I don't know if you saw it come out, called The Titans of Multifamily. It's actually going live here Monday, and this is being recorded on November 12th. But those were all men with anywhere from 15,000 to 150,000 deals that they've done, and so as a woman, I want you to speak to the women that are looking at this business, and maybe talk about some of the barriers that you had, if any, if maybe they were just mental, but could you speak to the women, female listeners that I have, and hopefully encourage them as you've done it? I mean, Maureen's been on my stage numerous times when we had live events and even live stream, I think. And so can you speak to the ladies as to the experiences that you had because of your gender, if any, and what they might do to push past anything like that? Sure. Well, I mean, I that's a great thing to bring up, Rod. I tell people before, I do see it as a benefit. We definitely stand out a little bit. We're a little different. And, there are different things that we run into that I think it's our attitude is helps us the way we deal with it and approach it. Right. So I've gotten the comments, do we have to wait for your dad to come in and sign these papers? And that was a good one. I had to wow, God, thank God I wasn't there. I would have unleashed anyway.
No, because you just realize, it's them. It's just their point of view. It's not me. It's not a reflection of me. It's not because I act like a young girl that doesn't know what she's doing. It's just there's their perspective, right? That's all that is. I love that you said that it's a benefit. Because that is a mindset. That's a foundational, overarching mindset belief that is huge. So ladies, I hope you own that one. That is fantastic. Because it is. My God, yeah. You have the ability to use vulnerability, which will drop a man to his knees. And so, it is absolutely a benefit. I love it. Please continue. People have said, is your husband coming? Or are we waiting for your husband? That's another thing. I was like, no, he's not involved with the business. So, but thank you for being considerate, right?
Love it.
And I think one of the biggest mind switch is don't ever be a victim. Don't ever position yourself as a victim. If you don't get that deal, even if it was strictly, if they said to you, oh, I'm never giving it to a female, which I doubt you'd ever hear, but if really somebody had the perspective or the position to say that, don't own that. Just be like, wow, that dude really has some issues with his mom, maybe. Or we have a joke around, if somebody cuts us off, I have my kids are in their 20s, my business partner's 30, and sometimes they get a little aggressive driving. And, somebody cuts you off in lane and when you're driving, and I was like, he might go home and get beat up by his wife. So this is what he has to do. So it's all perspective, right? That driver, that's why he's so angry driving. It's not you. And so I never think of it as me or a fault of me. Maybe I should once in a while. No, I love it. It's like water off a duck's back, and that's how it should be. I love it. And
And that's the reason you're successful is you don't internalize it. What else would you tell ladies that are thinking about getting into this business? What advice would you give them?
Yeah, I say just don't stop. That's the thing is you have to have that attitude that, I'm going to make this happen no matter what happens. And it's almost going back to like the light bulb thing, right? When he was creating the light bulb, 10,000 ways not to do it. Just when you hit a wall, you're like, oh, shoot, that didn't work. Let me try it again. Was it the situation? Was it the guy? Was it my experience? What do I need to overcome this? And so everyone is a challenge that makes you stronger. Every time you say no. So I had about 4 or 5 deals in the very beginning. I was just telling somebody this the other day too, so it's funny. But I had 4 or 5 deals in the beginning that I really thought were going to be the first deal. First deal is the hardest one by far. And that's the one that I think it's only met. You're almost like tested along the way because this business is so friggin' awesome once you do figure it out. Right. But like you got to almost prove yourself, I feel. So as I was getting these, either a team together or a deal together and it would fall apart. I mean, it's devastating. It's crushing. But you know what? Let yourself feel sorry for yourself for 5 seconds and like switch it and get back on there and say, damn, I fell off the horse, but I'm going to get back on that sucker and let's just try it again. Like that wasn't it. And you just have to keep going for it no matter what. And, we do have children involved. We do have, well,
you do, you have
I do. And just women in general, sometimes they're the mom or the wife. Okay. And, there is a balance there that I think is a little unique, but females typically can juggle more things than dudes. No offense to guys, but
no. You are definitely the superior sex. So don't even worry about that. That is an absolute fact. And let me circle back on something you just said. Guys, that road to your outcome, to your goals is never a straight line. It's like I use the analogy at my live events. If you're a fisherman or you're or a pilot, you're off course 90% of the time, but you always end up in the right place as long as you don't give up and recognize that it's not a straight line. So let me ask you this. Talk about any kind of like aha moments that you had in this journey. And you can go back to when you bought your first duplex or triplex. I forgot what it was, but talk about any aha moments that maybe you had about this business or about your capabilities, or maybe the female component, anything that comes to mind for that.
Well, I do. People do remember you, I think, as a female in this business because it is so male dominated. And I have a friend out in California, and she's been in real estate forever. And she said, she goes, I think we were talking about the NMHC, which is a big gathering of brokers and things like that. And, you just see a sea of suit
jackets. I remember seeing you at the last one. Yeah. And that's National Multifamily Housing Council, I believe it is, right?
Yes. And it's huge.
And it's the event really to go to meet brokers and other vendors and things in the business. But I remember seeing you and William at the last one, or the last one I went to in San Diego anyway. And you're right. It was all guys. In fact, it was funny. It was really funny. I joke about this component in that, I was the only one that didn't have a jacket on. I was literally out of a few thousand people. I had my black V-neck on, and it was really kind of hilarious. Anyway, I interrupted. Please continue.
No. It's just like, how do you stand out? What makes you different? There's many, you'll hear throughout, people like to do business with people like them, right? And you say, wow, I'm so different. I'm not golfing on the weekends. I'm not, necessarily, they talk about sports games and stuff. And I'm always like, when they tell me the team that's playing, I'm trying to guess the sport that it's related to. Like, I just don't know sports whatsoever, right? I'm like, is that hockey? And they're like, no, Maureen, baseball. I'm like, oh, cool. So I don't know. But, it's still finding commonality. And like I said, there's, we can be kind. And I think when we go into negotiations too, I've saved some deals because you get the attorneys all doing their, and I love Matt. I'm not trying to diss on any guys, but sometimes guys can get a little heated with each other, and the ego.
Well, ego and need to be significant comes into play. Sure.
Yeah, but when we come approach, there's just like a different approach sometimes. Like I've just gone sometimes right to the seller. We get rid of the attorneys, we get rid of the brokers, and just say, hey, you want to sell this and I want to buy it. What's the real problem here? Like, let's figure out a solution. And I think they're not as combative sometimes with us. Like, It's not an ego thing. It's just like, it's sincere too. I just want to get the deal done. Like, let's forget about all this other stuff. So, and I don't know as a guy, if they can maybe.
No, you have a definite advantage. A woman has a definite advantage in that in that scenario that you just described. No question. No question.
I just want to do it. I mean, there's no trickery involved. Or
no, but it's an inherent advantage. It just is. I mean, let's, and that's what my female listeners need to hear, is that they may think the deck is stacked against them. It's really not. That's just perception. That's just truly, that's just mindset. So let me ask you this. Yeah.
One other thing I just want to mention, Rod, is that deal I call that unicorn deal that we still have out in Atlanta. It's just an awesome deal we bought, but we bought that from the original developers. A lot of people were going to see it and kind of like circling around it like vultures when we knew it might come up for sale, right? And I went out there with my daughter and we happened to meet. It was a lady, her husband had passed away, and that's the reason, like, we all thought it might come up for sale. And it's like, when he did pass away, the next call was to the broker to say, hey, can I meet that nice lady that came out with her daughter? Like,
nice.
I'm sure she probably didn't remember the 10 sets of dudes that all kind of looked the same in the same suits. But they remembered us. So we do it, in every situation. It might not give you the edge, but it does work. You just there's benefits to it as well.
Oh, no question. No, I think the benefits outweigh the negative, if there are any negative. So let me ask you this: what is the most challenging part of what you do right now, or maybe what has it been? What was it when you started, and maybe what is it now? Let's do it that way, because I want to talk to the people that haven't started yet.
From a female angle, or just the business itself?
Wherever you want to go with it.
I guess right now the struggle is growing fast enough, but maintaining that stable foundation, right? So you want to grow. It's always like, do you hire more people than you need? Do you pull back? And one of the reasons I restructured, just going back to the management company just for a second, is I wanted to do the third party, and not because I like to torture myself and deal with other people's problems.
Right. I was wondering.
I wanted to have that corporate support for my properties that I can't necessarily afford, running 2,000 units or whatever number we're at now. But
you need scale to be able to do that.
You want that marketing expert. You want that person that can stay focused on different aspects of it. The accounting in-house, like all that stuff was important. And so that's it. It's like, we want to grow, but you almost can't grow until you get certain things in place, but you can't really afford to get those things in place until you grow. So there's constantly that push.
It's fascinating that you're talking about this, is because, I told you about those 4 Titans, I called them, that I interviewed. And that is the exact same situation that 3 of them had. The 4th one, and I'll just tell you what we discussed on that call, was the EOS system with Traction, the book Traction.
We've done that.
Yeah, and that has really helped. And Albert Barra's, one of those 4 guys, was actually in that book. He was one of the companies that got him that was in that book. Anyway, it's just interesting to hear you having the same issues, as these larger groups had. So, what do you think? Well, what's your favorite part of what you do? The challenge, you talked about the challenge. Well, did you bring up the challenge? Well, did you answer that question?
That was it. Just that conflict on push, like how fast you grow. My favorite part is like, it's not, people say, I do this so I could lead my own life. And I've realized I'm just a workaholic. No matter what I'm doing, I'm going to work a lot. But my favorite part of this is actually the people that I get to meet and interact with. So this is a huge point of connection with me, and like getting to know you, Rod, right? And getting to know all these fabulous people, because I think the people that get to the upper ranks of this business, like, are really good people. Like, a lot of them are good to like their soul. I think when you're beginning in real estate, you have to really be careful and be alert, because it's a low barrier to entry type of job, right? So there's a lot of people trying to make fast bucks, or, they're just out for themselves. They're just they don't care if they screw a couple people along the way, like, in business, because they just, that's just the way they are. They're just aggressive, and it's me. So those people only get so far. Eventually they're going to step on the wrong person. They're going to take advantage of the wrong person or do the wrong deal. So, but once you get up into kind of this upper layer where things are really happening, just the people are freaking awesome. Like, they really,
I love the way you described it. Good to their soul. I love that. And, I think I find that they're more elegant too. Don't you?
Yeah, and trustworthy. Like, I've done a lot of deals. Like, I just was talking with the guys, like, I haven't signed a CA in 15 years. He's like, if somebody needs me to sign a CA, he goes, I don't do it. He goes, because He goes, I just don't want that energy into it. And they're just like, and he goes, if they won't do the deal without a CA, then that's fine. He goes, but I never go back on my word. And if they don't take my word, like if they don't trust me, I get it.
I love it. I love it.
Just meeting these different people with those great attitudes that really things are done on a handshake sometimes, and just seeing those.
And a CA, guys, is a confidentiality or non-circumvention agreement, depending upon what it is, just so you know. So, so what words of wisdom would you give aspiring investors, male or female? We'll get off the female thing. I think you've proven that that's not a hindrance. It's a plus. What words of advice would you give people that are thinking about this business, haven't taken action yet, maybe bought a house or a duplex, but they know they want more? What would you tell them?
Yeah, I'd say, with the market too, I've gotten asked a lot of questions and just saying like, oh, should I wait? Is the, thing going to collapse? What's going to happen? And of course, nobody has a crystal ball. But my opinion and kind of the consensus of some other people I know do is like, we do think there'll be some opportunities probably. I think it's going to take a little bit for things to shake out, probably the next 12 to 24 months. I think it's going to take a little while for some of these notes to come due and stuff like that. And I think the people that maybe will get in trouble are the people that either didn't have the correct amount of reserves and, are in one of the markets where there was more of an impact, like Atlanta, rents just keep going up. It's counterintuitive, but like Atlanta's still on fire, right? In a good way. So, but I think so some of those properties where maybe they really bought stretched out and, they say when the tide goes out, you see who's swimming naked, right? So I think some people are going to get caught swimming naked coming up. Yeah. And then also never, people are scared. Sometimes they say I shouldn't invest in a city with less than X amount of people, or, they get so caught up on these certain, just these criteria of what they hear from, you, Rod, or whoever they're listening to, right? Or people like me, but, never lose sight of just your own backyard too. If that's where you're comfortable starting, then start there. There could be a really good deal that would never be on my radar or Rod's radar because we're not used to this. We don't know this little city in Nevada or Oklahoma or wherever you're from but you can find some really juicy deals in these little niche markets.
There you can. Your backyard's your best place to ever consider buying in to start, for sure.
Yeah.
So let's talk about some of your favorite stories. You have some of my favorite stories in the business. So let's talk about some of your favorite stories in this business, because some of them are comical. So you pick. I mean, which ones I love, but you take it wherever you want to take it.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm going to be going through Atlanta next week, and I really miss my police friends. I haven't.
There you
seen
go.
them in a while,
Tell that story. How that came about.
That was a deal. The police originally, the way we bonded was over a big 280 unit project we were doing in Austell, Georgia, that we bought it 40% occupied. And man, it wasn't just that it was vacant. I mean, those units were. I look back on that, Rod, and I'm like, I don't know what else they
right. Guys, there's things called heavy lifts. This would be beyond a heavy lift. Anyway, so talk about what you did and the benefits of what you did.
Yeah, so I just we bought another property near this one, and I had gone to like a safety meeting that the city had. I just happened to be in town, and I don't even know how I caught wind of it, but a safety committee meeting. I'm like, oh, let me go see what they're doing in the area. This was a new area for me, so I wanted to go understand it more. And I believe he was the major and the captain at the time, in charge of that precinct for those properties. And I introduced myself, and I think my daughter might have been with me, and one of the managers. And, we introduced ourselves and just said, hey, if there's anything we can do, we want to team up with you guys. We have some properties we're cleaning up here. There's a little bit of trouble, but they're good properties. I look at the bones, what they're doing in the area, things like that. And so we exchanged cards and stuff, and we just became really good friends. And they said, they've had a bunch of owners come in and say they're going to clean it up, but they don't do it. And we did it within 60 days. I remember the mail person coming through and saying, they said, I've been doing this route for 8 years or whatever. And they said, I cannot believe the difference in 60 days that you've made.
So talk about, I want to stop you there. What did you do in those 60 days? What took place? I know, but I want my listeners to hear it.
Sure. So basically, in order to secure a property, and this was with the police input too, it's number one, holes in the fence. We use something called expanded metal, where it's actually metal cut and pulled, so they can't just cut it with anything, right? And then, I mean, some people are really aggressive. They try to go under it, so we're banging and re-rod in the ground, and it's like, trying to keep that. So it's number one, the perimeter. So they have a type of fence called 6-in-1, 6 feet, and then 1 foot for barbed wire. So you got to keep the right people in and the right people out, right? So that's not necessarily in, I guess, unless they're not paying their rent. But no, you got to keep the people out just from cutting through. That's what you want to avoid.
Right.
And then cameras. The perimeter was a huge impact. And then the cameras were giant too. So every property we buy, we put a camera system in. And I mean, it's really saved our butts a few times, residents' butts, just conflicts with police, cars. Sometimes
fire. I remember you had fire and you figured out who it was. And yes. Yeah. Okay. And obviously you put in a front gate that people had to go through as well.
Sometimes we'll do the front gate. There's some pros and cons of front gates, but lighting too, show up at night or have your construction manager, whoever you have, drive that sucker at night, because we put in LED lights. It was like daylight on this one property, but man, between cameras, perimeter, and lighting, those are the three that'll make the biggest difference.
All right. So continue with your police story. I just wanted to dig in for a second.
Oh, we had all kinds of stuff. I mean, I used to have them, there's a canine unit. So, that comes from my story. Another one in Atlanta where we had
well, you didn't finish this one. So you met these guys. You ended up paying for their Christmas dinner, which was nothing. I mean, it was a couple grand or something, if I recall. But then you really needed them. Talk about that. I love that. I mean, we may have done this on a previous podcast, but I just love the story. So talk about
that. Was way before even the Christmas dinner. They were just so impressed with what we made in the difference in that area, because it really was the source of a lot of crime. They used to call it the bandos. I found out later, like the abandoned units, because there were so many abandoned units. So I went in and I had a contractor right before we closed on the second deal there. I went in and we kind of looked at, this is a good sample apartment for us. So I wanted contractors to come through to do some bidding for me to get prices. So I went the day before, looked at the particular unit we're going to use. And then I showed up, I had a contractor and the manager with me the next day. And we go to open the door and we walk into 8 or 9, really big dudes, and they weren't supposed to be there. It was abandoned. We didn't know what the hell was going on. I looked at the manager, who was the same kind of demographic as everybody else there. It's I kind of stood out. I was a little different, right? But I looked at the manager and he looked scared. And I was like, oh, it just hit me all of a sudden. In all the years of doing this, I never was really scared. And I was like, this could be a very interesting situation. So right. I stepped back and the guy, one guy he just walked past us and left. And the other guy, everybody's kind of it was frozen for a second. Right. And I just texted one of the majors that I knew. He gave me his cell phone number and I'm like, hey, I said, are you around town? Are you in the area? And he's like, no, what do you need? And I said, we just stumbled on a bunch of squatters. And I said, he goes, are you okay? And I just sent back a question mark. We weren't quite sure. And man, he said, I'm just walking into a meeting, but he goes, hang on. And we heard the sirens that. It was that quick. It wasn't even 10 seconds. And we heard the sirens. They had every friggin' car in that precinct, 10 cars came in and showed up. And they ended up making 2 arrests. A couple people had little bits of pot on them or something. But it was the reaction was that. And the manager looked at me and he said, did you do that? And I was like, yeah, I did that. So it was awesome. So it's having that backup and to know you're serious and you're in it for them. And he told me, he goes, Maureen, he's like, don't tell my wife or the, what do you say? Or the mayor. He's like, or the governor, or not what it was. Yeah, the mayor there. He goes, but you are the most important person in this county to me. So your safety is number one to me.
Oh, I love it. I love it. And guys, just to circle back on this, when you buy an asset, one of those first calls you should make is to the non-emergency police number and find out what the history has been at that asset, who you connect with in the case of problems and any suggestions that they have and on. You build that relationship. It's a critical relationship. Talk about for a minute, you had that asset where females would rent a unit, but then the boyfriends would come in and they would be dealing the drugs, and that's almost impossible to screen for. Talk about what you did in that situation, just to land the plane on this, just because it's so funny.
Yeah, so that was a property we had in Decatur, Georgia, also in the Atlanta MSA. But we went into this property originally, and we had to go through and kind of clean out some of the bad apples. Things like that. And I've also learned in this business, there's usually just a handful. There's 2 or 3 people. Once you get rid of those core people in a like, I'd say like a bad property or a property that has some violent issues or something like that, you get rid of those couple people, a lot of that stuff goes away because it's their friends, it's their visitors, it's things like that. So you got to find those people. So we had this one in Atlanta where we got good control of it really fast. I have some managers that are so good at this. So they went in, they got rid of those people. It was running really smooth. Then all of a sudden we're having these problems. And we were trying to figure out what it was. So we screen right. That's usually a big criteria. If you have problems, like, are we screening correctly? Sure. Who are we letting in? What kind of stuff we're doing? So, and I was telling Rod, it's not like the people that we're allowing in. It's like the lady that might have a couple kids and all of a sudden she gets to lose her boyfriend. Or another common one is like the grandmother who now the son that kind of nobody will, or the grandson that nobody will deal with, or just got out of jail or whatever the heck it is, all of a sudden moves in with grandma, right? So those are like the 2 scenarios where we get troubled units again. Right. And so we had this one 250 unit asset, and there were 3 of them. All of a sudden, like, we're getting these calls from 3, like a lot of visitors, people hanging out, like da. And so even if you go through the eviction process and saying, oh, you have an unregistered occupant or whatever that is, it takes like 60 days. It's not a quick thing. You have to give notice and all the legal stuff. So, this was one guy, he kept showing up with guns. Like, we see guns on the camera. They would, they would scare other residents. It was getting really bad. And, in this particular area, the police are not as cooperative. So not all the police, those police in that county were awesome. Right. Not all the police are as helpful. And in this county, it's one of the ones that they're just not helpful. It's not good. So we, I was so frustrated, and we had like one of our tenants that's been there a long time. She had some run-in with them and like really scared her. And I'm like, that's a huge thing for me, is keeping these properties safe. So I was like, just this bullshit, like enough is enough. Right. And so just like, I said, you know what? I said, send a friggin' letter. We happen to have a security guard that had a German Shepherd at the time. And so that's what gave me the idea is I said, send a letter out and tell people that when they see the German Shepherd dogs on the property with the state police, tell them that we just offered our property for training purposes and not to be alarmed. And we just wanted to let them know so that they didn't
drug sniffing training, right? Drug sniffing training.
Yes, the DA, exactly, to train them for drugs for drug sniffing, and if they're going to plant stuff around and just not to be alarmed when they see this. So that was what the note they sent out. I said, don't just send it to those people. So like, oh, we'll send it to those units. I'm like, no, you got to send it to everybody. Like, we got to own this story, right? So they sent it out to everybody. The next day they were gone. They moved out and everything was quiet again.
I love that story. So shifting gears, because I'm bumping up against time here, but shifting gears, talk about sacrifice. What did you, because all success requires some sacrifice. So talk about what sacrifices you made, building this business and speak to that a little bit.
Yes, I mean, you do have choices, right? Anybody involved in any level of multifamily know about those choices whether you're painting a unit on the weekend and your friends are watching the game or going camping or whatever. And there is always that choices, or I should say that inner turmoil a little bit on, is what I'm doing the right thing, right? So I think one of the things is you have to make sure that you're happy doing it and you're, that, you could see the big picture. And, looking back on the kind of my journey from starting with the smaller things to the larger ones now, when I was dealing with the smaller things with the 2 and 3 families and we were doing renovations ourselves, that was like some of the most fun times with our family. Like, it sounds kind of weird, but I really miss that. I realized that the other day. Now it's a business. I have both my kids are in the business. My daughter's in Atlanta. My son's in Indiana. They're doing their things. They're helping us with Capex or, managing the properties at times. And they're awesome because they're getting trained and everything. But like, I really miss those times when we were all sweaty on the summers and freaking, doing demo and trying to get the units cleaned up, like, because we're all working as a team. My brother was there, my nephew was there, my husband was there, like, everybody was pitching in and trying to like see how fast we could turn a unit or lay flooring. And I really miss those times. But I think sacrifices, you just, I got a lot out of it because the family is all part of it. So for me, it's fulfilling that way. And now that the kids are older, even though I don't get to see them as much as I did when they're little, because they're moved out, they're in their 20s now, but I do love that I get to interact with them. So
it's a blessing.
It really is. And it's nice. You have to be careful about supporting your family, because I ran into that for a little while in the beginning, where you have, like, I had all these people on payroll, and you realize it was causing a lot of stress, and not everybody thought they had to perform like other people. So it took a little while to kind of balance that out, but we're good now. And I love that part of it. But sacrifice, but you got to do what you feel. Like, I could have said, well, if I just stayed at my normal corporate job, I would have worked 40 hours a week, and life would have been okay. Would have just been like everybody else. There was a lot of sacrifice in the beginning. Again, the weekends were into this, and I think the people that are successful at it, you get a little obsessed with it. Like, you think about it constantly, day and night. It's in your head. Even when you're talking to people, you're thinking about deals or whatever. And I think we go through that. A lot of us do, where it becomes like an obsession. And there are sacrifices to that, but if you could put a few years into, what's the saying about an entrepreneur?
Grind, live a few years like most people won't, so you can live the rest of your life like most people can't. And I mean, you're a testament to that for sure. Let me shift gears because we're almost out of time, and I want to ask you another question about leadership. You've certainly evolved as a leader. I know I've known you for a while now. You've had big partnership breakup, and you've had issues like you described with family members that weren't holding their weight, and that's painful when it's family and you have to deal with it. And I remember talking to you about it. How have you evolved as a leader, and what do you think are some of the best qualities a leader should have? Can you speak to that for a moment? And we have to end with that. Unfortunately, I'm almost out of time.
Yeah, sure. I think it's just knowing that our job is making sure the company is successful, right? Because we have a lot of people depending on us. We employ, I think it's pretty close to 100 people now between the property management, the asset management, the construction. And so that, you have to realize your decisions not only impact them, but, they have families, they have wives or husbands and kids. And so, I mean, my decisions every day impact probably 500 people. I don't know what the numbers would be. And then you also have to make sure that the company is surviving and thriving, right? That's important. You want them to know that it's consistent and you're growing. You have to grow. You're either growing or dying all the time, right? And I don't ever want to be pulling back. I like to continue to grow. But it gives them the confidence too to stay on with you and to believe in your vision when they see it come through. And I do think sometimes I have to step back and be like, okay, am I like emotionally reacting to this, or is this the sense? Well, sometimes I do step back. You have to have your core people you trust that you can run stuff by. That's important, because not any one of us is good at every single part of this, right? We have our parts that we really excel at. But then we all have weaknesses, left brain, right brain, however you want to look at it. But, know who is good on your team too, and who you can trust. And I have people like Rod, and, sometimes we do call each other and bounce stuff off each other. Right, Rod? Or I have other, some of the other just people in my position in other companies. We're friends. We're not enemies and foes, but because we can help each other. I'll reach out to Ivan once in a while, or I'll call Ferris, or
Maureen is part of my multifamily boardroom mastermind, and Ivan and Ferris are a couple of the members, and you want to be around people that that have a similar vision. Napoleon Hill calls a mastermind anytime two like-minded people get together with a same definiteness of purpose. They both have the same, visions for their futures. It creates this third intangible mind that's greater than the sum of the parts. And you need people to bounce things off of. And, there are people in that organization. We just added all four of those people, those titans. So we just literally added $8.5 billion represented by the new members of the mastermind. So it's just becoming something pretty amazing, because you want to be around people that think what you think is hard is easy. And so I was so blessed to get these four guys in, but
exactly. And William, right? So William is my business partner. And what William brings is he comes from Ernst & Young. He's a master's degree in accounting. And so he has that structure and that analytical side that can keep. So some things like I have to know as a leader of when this isn't the best thing for me to run with, and to ask William to take the lead on something. And sometimes it's hard because we're so used to controlling every friggin' thing to get to where we got. But we do have to let go and know the people and have confidence in the people that can take over those things. And the last thing I'd probably want to just share is anybody you get involved in, and this is a big thing with my company and our company, I should say, and just anybody I deal with, is I have to be able to trust them. Yeah. Like once I find I can't trust somebody, they could lie about the stupidest little thing.
It's over. Yeah. It's over.
Because it's like, you can't jeopardize 500 people. Maybe you like this person, but you can't really trust them. Like, and then how much energy are you wasting on like that, worrying about what they're doing or checking or like leading up? And it's just not worth it. Even if it's like a fast way, I'd rather miss out making $1 million than work with somebody that I don't trust or I'm not having a pleasant time.
No, you can't. Once that trust is gone, it's gone forever, unfortunately. Listen, I could talk to you for another 3 hours, and I wish I could. Unfortunately, they booked me back to back today, but it's such a treat to see you. Totally. And come visit again soon, and bring your daughter or anybody.
I will. Tell them I said hi and get my room ready.
It's great to see you, and I'm gonna have to literally go right now. Anyway, thank you for coming on it.
Talk to you later.
Hope I see you soon. Take care. Bye.
Rod, I know a lot of our listeners are wanting to take their multifamily investing business to the next level. Now, I know you've been hard at work helping our Warrior students do just that using our ACT methodology, which is awareness, close, and transform. Can you explain to the listeners how they can get our help?
You bet. Guys, we've been going nonstop for 3 years, building an amazing community of like-minded people. And our coaching students, which we call our warriors, have had extraordinary results. They've purchased thousands and thousands of units. And last year, we did over 1,000 units with our students. And we're looking to grow this group and take it to the next level. We're looking for people who want to follow a proven framework that's really step by step, and then leverage our systems and network to raise equity, to find and close deals, and to build partnerships nationwide. Now, our warrior community is finding success in any market cycle. So if you're interested in finding out more about how you can become more of our incredible network and take advantage of the incredible opportunities that are coming very soon, apply to work with us at mentorwithrod.com or text CRUSH to 41411. That's mentorwithrod.com or text CRUSH to 41411.